Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last installment of the 2015-2016 CEO Breakfast and Strategy Series. I'm Tom Kunkel, president of St. Norbert College, and along with our sponsors, we are so pleased to have you with us this morning. We're especially pleased to have you with us this morning because you will remember that when Peter was originally supposed to speak, we had a snow day. Imagine that in Green Bay. And so we thank you very much. We want to thank Peter for reaccommodating us with this date, and thank you for circling back and joining us. For 18 years, the CEO Series has been providing area executives with the opportunity to hear from some of our top business leaders. This resource is being brought to you through the generosity of our presenting sponsor, WPS Health Insurance Arise Health Plan, and our title sponsors are Whipley, Imaginasium, Insight Publications, Johnson Bank, Johnson Insurance, and today's sponsor is Catholic Financial Life. Please take the folders at your place with you when you go and take a little time to review the information inside. We'd appreciate it. And at this time, I'd like to call my friend and colleague, Father Sal Cuccia, to offer grace.
God of creation and transformation, in the death and resurrection of your Son, you made all things new. Inspire us by your creativity toward new beginnings. Help us to be open to new possibilities, to accept the challenges of new ways of using our gifts and talents for the service of others. With your hand to support us, all things are possible. Bless this food we are about to share. As we are nourished by it, may we be mindful of those who are in need and be strengthened in our commitment of service to them. We pray through Christ our Lord.
Thank you, Sal. We had commencement outside on Sunday for the first time in 40 years, and we had asked all the Norbertines to pray for dry weather, but sources tell me that it was Sal who actually got the job done. So, Sal, thank you. Enjoy your breakfast, and we'll be back with Peter and our program shortly. Hope you enjoyed your breakfast. And now on to the main event. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Peter McMahon, today's speaker. Peter serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer of Shopko Stores Operating Company. Founded in 1962 and headquartered right here, ShopCo operates 363 stores in 24 states. Since joining ShopCo in 2013, Peter led a restructuring which reduced overhead and drove a 20% growth in store base, most recently adding 54 stores in 2015. He led a complete overhaul of their e-commerce business, building an infrastructure to support ship from, store, and other platforms to increase speed and efficiency, and launched a new branding strategy. These efforts have improved ShopCo's profitability by 45%. Prior to coming to ShopCo, Peter served as the Chief Operating Officer of Loblaw, Canada's largest food retailer, and a leading provider of drugstore, general merchandise, and financial products and services. His previous experience includes leadership positions with Walmart and other global retailers. He holds a degree in economics from the University of London. Please welcome Mr. Peter McMahon.
Thank you. Can you hear me at the back? I think you realize I'm not from Green Bay when you hear my accent. That's the first comment I normally get. And who says that Green Bay weather can't spoil a party then? Yeah? When you come here from England, these guys are just telling me that they find the weather here quite normal. When you come from England, where everybody perceives it rains all the time, which it doesn't, it only rains 6 days a week. You get 1 day off. But the temperature is significantly different, so it takes a bit of time to get used to it. So talking about today, I've got about 25 minutes. I'm going to move fairly quickly, and hopefully we can take some questions at the end. I call this a turnaround story. It can be called a turnaround story, or it can be a change program. And most of my life has been in change. I've been a retailer all my life, since I left school virtually. I left university. It wasn't my intention, but when I got into it, I found it such a fascinating, such a changing, fast business that I never went back and stayed where I was. I've had the benefit of working in 9 different countries around the world and predominantly been used in the past by my companies to lead change. Because retail, I argue, is probably the fastest changing business that there is of any other industry I can think of anyway. One of the benefits since I've been in North America, which is probably the best part of 10, 11 years now, at least when I'm dealing with people and trying to get them to change, you actually speak the same language as me. You work in Japan, you work in Hungary, or you work in Slovakia, and you managing people that you constantly talk to through interpreters, it often makes life a bit more difficult. So I actually work for a company called Sun Capital. They're a private equity business, and they're based in Boca, which is a slightly different climate than here. I was actually down there last week. And they bought ShopCo back in, believe it or not, about 2005. Now, they specialize in buying what they call distressed or existing businesses that are not really moving or changing. And then they put a management team in, and then they change it, and they hopefully make it better, and then they sell it on. That's what private equity do. ShopCo, owning a company like ShopCo for that long for a private equity company is arguably being like being married for 75 years. It's a very, very long time to have that sort of investment in. And in all fairness to ShopCo, one of the reasons they kept it was still profitable. Now, if you read the headlines you read today, and particularly last week, what's the business case for change? Well, you hear these in the press all the time. Everything that could go wrong during the holiday season went wrong. Bricks and mortars, they call them. They call it bricks and clicks today. That's the difference between the stores and the online, which customers are moving more and more to. Black Friday fizzles with consumer sales tumbles. Bricks and mortar stores last Black Friday were 10% down on the previous Black Friday. Now, that's multiple billions of dollars of sales that didn't materialize in big boxes. And the e-com sites, as you call them, the shop online, deliver to home, were up 13%. So there's a major switch by the customer. I won't read all these, but Walmart woes reflect retail sales sector weakness. I always like it when Walmart don't do so well. No, I shouldn't say that, but I do, even though I've worked for them. Macy's announces massive layoffs and store closings. You've seen Macy's results last week. Have you seen the press? Hugely negative. I was with Terry, who's the CEO of Macy's in January, and he's trying to compensate for a business that's historically been an icon of the US, always grown, is now in a reverse situation. Retailers feel the squeeze in North America's poverty economy. Actually improving, but we're dealing with a different type of customer now. The biggest customer base today are these people called millennials. How many millennials are in the room? Not many, see, but the millennials now are the biggest sector of customers in retail. It used to be the boomers. How many boomers are in the room? Plenty more of you, yeah. And we all went through this great recession in 2008 onwards, and customers learned to be frugal. They had to do, because the economy was bad. And now the economy is getting better and there's more disposable income. Why would they change? Why wouldn't they continue to seek today's? And the millennials today are the most connected generation that ever in the history of the planet, and can actually research items and get the best prices before they even walk into a store or before they even decide what they're going to buy. Omnichannel shop is an emerging retail trend. Walmart, Amazon and Google are looming for e-commerce wars. So Amazon grew 22% this year against 24% last year. That means their sales are drawing out of bricks and mortar stores, just Amazon alone, an average of $16 billion every year. $16 billion of retail sales just in Amazon are transferring from stores to online. So what happened in ShopCo? Well, I deal with change all the time, and ShopCo to a degree, and this is no reflection on the people inside of it, because I've got a lot of long-time servers in ShopCo, been with the company a long time, but they became a bit stale, and the ways of working remained the same. And they didn't try to adapt or change for this. So we did lots of changes inside ShopCo. And one thing I learned only 2 weeks ago, that when you're talking to a group of millennials and you want to motivate a millennial, what you always do first is show them the outcome of what they're going to get by doing a process. And then they're more prepared to do the process. So 2.5 years on in ShopCo, this is the outcome that we are today. So if you take the sales since Sun Capital bought them in 2005, you could see year on year, right up to the end of 2013, sales declined. That looks quite a dramatic graph, but I can guarantee you that in bricks and mortar stores, most graphs would look the same if you exclude the e-com. But you can see the Shopco was in a decline and was closing stores. When they bought them in 2005, they had about 158 stores. When I arrived in 2013, they had 131, and they just bought a company called Parmida, which added some other stores to it. Suddenly in 2014, the line reversed. Now, I'll tell you the reasons why that happened in the meantime. That's due also to growth, because for the first time in all of Shopco's life from 2005, the business began to expand and open new stores, which was particularly against all of the trends of the other bricks and mortar stores. And that's what happened to EBITDA. EBITDA is profit before tax and amortization. You can see that it had been fairly stagnant over the years, and now it's on an upward trajectory. And we're one of the few retailers in the US and North America who are actually opening new stores and growing retail volume. So it's completely against the trend. We're also doing that by growing our online site, ShopCo.com, which I hope you all shop at. And that is trading this year up to the end of April. ShopCo.com was 80% up on the previous year's sales. So you can see memento is beginning to build. This slide I always put up, involving the team. So how did I go about and what was wrong with Shopco? And I've seen this before in many companies around the world. When I've gone into companies and I've seen some of the biggest brands that you would recognize fall into these 5 categories here over a period of time. I always say the companies don't kill themselves. The icon names you've read in the past have gone bankrupt or closed. The company didn't decide it was going to go bankrupt and kill itself. It didn't wake up one morning and say, JCPenney is now back on the up. But 4 years ago, JCPenney didn't say, oh, by the way, I'm going to kill myself today and I'm going to change the way I treat the American customer. And my sales are going to be 40% negative. And I'm going to borrow that much money to be able to pay the suppliers. People kill companies. People like me. I don't personally, I don't, but people like me, executive boards and chairmen and CEOs kill companies. Companies don't kill themselves. And I've seen so many times some of the brands I've worked for and been involved in, that complacency is one of the key 5 things that kills companies. And Shopco suffered with complacency. How many times have I seen that a company becomes the number 1 in its field? And I'll give you a UK example. J. Sainsbury's, you've probably heard of them. Biggest supermarket company in the UK from about 1980 to about 1995. And when I joined them in 1993, I just couldn't believe the complacency in the organization and the complexity they had built in the organization, because they'd made things so complicated. Decision processes were so long and elongated. You had to get 20 signatures to spend £100,000 them days. And they thought that was the right thing to do because they were number 1 and very successful. They thought if we keep that sort of control on things, this central control on things, then we'll always be good. The other thing I think about is faulty radar. Now, we all know what radar's for. It's to tell you what's approaching you and what's coming. And one thing you always need to do in a business is have your team and your advisors aware of what's happening in the market. Now, in the US particularly last year, there was faulty radar. And that happened on Black Friday. Because every retailer, including Shopco, had geared up for the sales they normally take on a Black Friday. They bought all the merchandise for that sales they take on a Black Friday. They manned the stores and they opened all the hours, which we know are very unpopular with the staff for Good Friday, and the customer didn't turn up. 10% of the customers didn't arrive. So all of us are guilty then of faulty radar, because one thing you always need to do in any business and in retail is understand what's coming at you and what the potential risks are. And we missed it. The other one is arrogance. I couldn't believe Sainsbury's when I walked in there. The guys I worked with talked to me and said, we're the best. We're absolutely great. Everything we do turns to gold. When I looked around the business, I said, absolutely, you're not nowhere near the best for where I've worked previously. I had the same problem in Shopko. The people in Shopko thought that they were the best thing. And they thought everything evolved around Wisconsin, which is not a bad thing. But they were the best in Wisconsin, assumed they were the best everywhere else, and they weren't the best. And that arrogance is very dangerous, because you make assumptions which are not always true. And the other thing you always have to do if you want to attract customers and keep customers, you have to execute every day 100% right. The biggest turn-off for customers is quite simply, I come to your stores every day to shop, because I like the ShopCo brand, I feel loyal to the ShopCo brand, but this happens all around the world. When you ask them the 5 things that they don't like, you would think the first one is always the price, wouldn't you? You're too expensive, everything's too dear. The first thing that they talk about in 90% of the times, if not 100% of the times, is I can't find what I want every time I go in. So you have to provide, that means you have to execute. You have to execute on displays, on availability, on cleanliness of stores, on the right people at the right time in the right place, pleasant staff. Execution, I've always thought of retail this way. 20% is strategy. What am I going to do? What am I going to do for the next year, the year after? And I personally think retail, planning more than 3 years out currently is a waste of time, because it's changing that rapidly. 80% of it is delivering what the strategy tells you you're going to do and making sure you execute every day. So I've got this transformation philosophy that I've worked on for a number of years. And this is just, I'll run through these fairly quickly, but in my view is that you keep it simple. You don't overcomplicate. You don't want too many scientists devising the strategy. You want to keep it simple so people understand where you're going, what you're going to do. Focus on execution, as I've just said. Make sure you deliver what your customers say is most important to them. Listen to your operators. To me, the people who day-to-day, when I talk, when I'm in the office here in Green Bay and I sit through the committee meetings I take and executive meetings, I enjoy nothing more. What I'm doing after this meeting is going down to Texas for 3 days. I enjoy nothing more than going down and talking to the people who are operating the stores, the staff who are running the stores, because they tell you as it actually is. Yeah? They don't tell you what it feels like sitting in Green Bay or in a head office anywhere in the country. They tell you actually what you are delivering and actually what the experience is for the customers at the front end. So a big part of my rule has always been I get out and about and I listen to operators. Think small. In my mind, small is big. Don't try to do too many things at the same time. You know, when you're trying to change a business, you're trying to change people. You're trying to change things that they've been doing for many, many years. You're trying to change the culture of the organization. To get them to do 1,000 things gets lost in the stratosphere. To get them to do 100 of the right things is the way you need to focus on. Less is more, often more, which goes back to the same point. Always your people come first. Now in any change, as there was in Shopko, as there was in Tesco, as there was in Walmart, certainly in Loblaw in Canada, any change brings people issues. People fear change. People often say people don't like change. That's not actually true. If you show them the reason why you're changing, they adapt far easier. But people fear what the new change may be. I often call it about putting organisations from the warm room out into the cold. It takes time for them to get used to the cold, but eventually they settle. People are very important. You can't change any business without involving your people. But you need to make sure that they're constantly at the head of the plan. And you're talking about them whenever you're doing things. And think like your customers, obviously. So many times people like me around the world think that we know all of the retail data there is to know and we're the expert on the customer. I'm spending Thursday from 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night talking to customer groups, and they don't know who I am. I'm just part of the team. Because that's the way I get my feedback from customers about how, because they don't pull any punches, customers. They tell you if it's bad. They don't mind saying you're too expensive, your prices are ridiculous, you've never got the product they want, they don't pull any punches with you. That's the way you learn about your customers. If you do the right thing, if in doubt, but then do it right. And remember, ego stands for edging good out. Don't be arrogant. I consider myself to be part of the ShopCo team. I've always tried to manage on a very flat structure. I spend more of my time irritating them by walking around the office talking to them, I think I'm checking on what they're doing. Where are we now then? Well, the net equity value of the company increased by 60%, and that's what private equity companies like. Positive sales growth, EBITDA beats budget, so we're back on track for profitability. We've got growth in margin rate, the margin, free cash flow is on forecast. Inventory, which is another killer of retailers when you buy the wrong stuff or you get the weather forecast wrong and you buy too much of something, is now under plan. We restructured the head office here in Green Bay, which did lead to some unfortunate layoffs, but this is a consequence of change. We had to change the way that we think and approach things and change process. Customer insights and the way our customers think and work are now part of our inbuilt into our daily operations. And if you sit into one of my meetings, we always talk about the customer. What would the customer want? Not about what we would want. And of course, we're now opening more stores. We've opened 150 so far, and by this time next year, we'll be over 400 stores. So Shopco has grown since 2012 from 131 stores to over 400 by the end of this year. We're now down in Texas, we're in Colorado, we're going to California, we're expanding with our smaller type format right across the country. So that's positive news as well. I think you've got to learn these lessons. The customer is king or queen. Always listen to the customer. Whatever business you're in, they're the people. People make the difference. There's certainly no place for arrogance, and don't take that statement lightly because I've seen that in so many businesses. Marks and Spencer's is probably a global brand you all recognize from the past. Same thing. We are number one, we're untouchable. 5 years later, Marks and Spencer's now is the 6th biggest retailer in the UK, and it's going to be probably part of a private equity buyout next year. Set the bar high, but do it in incremental steps. Challenge the norms of any organization. Empower the people in the business to change their own destiny. We have all sorts of communication tools. Every Tuesday in Shopco head office and in every store, you'll see a team huddle take place, where we talk to the people about what we've done, where we're going, what the strategy is, what the sales are, what the customers are saying about us, and we keep them constantly informed about that. Reward results and always strive for excellence. I use these. These are quite strange. A few years ago, I was in a hotel down in the south of England. It's one of those beautiful little English hotels that have these big libraries. And I was browsing around it one night because there was not a lot else to do. And I found this small book. It's called The First Book of Psychology. And it was written back in the, I think somewhere around the 1830s or 1840s by, I can't remember the person who wrote it now. So I was browsing through it and these 4 sort of statements were in there. So I read them and I understand, to understand what they actually meant. So miss the tunnel at the end of the light. Most people say kind of find the tunnel, find the light at the end of the tunnel. That's really about the faulty radar I talked about before. Find out what you need to avoid. Find out where you don't need to invest, or find out where you shouldn't invest. I mean, it would be crazy for any retailer today to go and say, I'm going to open another 350 very large malls across the US, wouldn't it? There's one example. So miss the light at the end of the tunnel really means understand your business and find out what you need to avoid doing before you get embroiled and get stuck into that tunnel with that light coming to you. And that takes forward thinking. Listen to the river. Listen to the river to me really is about what I talked about earlier. Listen to the river is listen to your operators. Listen to the people who operate your machinery or sit on your checkouts in the stores or fill the shelves or work on the back doors of the stores or work in the distribution centres. Talk to them. They'll tell you how it really is. They'll tell you that this great thing you changed up here, how it really landed on the shop floor. So talk to them, and they'll tell you exactly how your customers are thinking and what they're saying, because that's where most of the good communication takes place. Whenever I go into a business that needs to be changed, I always find the jewel in the toad's head. Has anybody got a clue what that means? I always like talking about the competition, by the way, because it's good for me. But take Sears, for example, today. Who knows Sears? Iconic retailer in huge distress. climbing, sales are going down, margins are going down. I think Eddie Lampard's trying to sell the silverware to keep the business going. But that was not a great iconic retailer. And what's inside Sears today, and what was inside Shopko? Just because the business is bad, it doesn't mean the people are bad. So when you go into any organisation that you want to change, like Sears, like Shopko, like other ones, the jewel is the people that work in the organisation, but they're not all bad. There's some excellent people inside these organisations. If you can harness onto those excellent people and motivate and generate them, they're the people that help you to turn a business around. Because they have so much in-depth knowledge of that organisation, often for many years, that they're the jewels in that organisation. And one of the key things I do is try to find them and harness them. And while you're doing all this, please avoid the funeral of the living corpse. Make it fun if you can. Some things you can never make fun in change situations, but some things can be very good fun and good to enjoy. Anybody walking around like this all day saying, oh my God, we're going through change. Oh my God, another day of change today. Your management teams are walking around saying, oh my God, another day of change today. Then change will never happen. People fear change more than want to embrace it. And once you get them past and tell them what it's about, and recognising there are some things which are not pleasant, then your change happens much quicker and in a different environment. Our morale scores in Shopco dropped. We use a scoring system there, and they dropped 25% in 2014, when we were actually taking much sales were up and margin were up, because that's when we implemented most of the changes. 12 months on, they've grown 26%. They've come back. And if you don't do the bottom one, then that happens far quicker. And have you got any questions? Thank you.
Yeah. Peter, I'll start. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy at Shopco about e-commerce, and I would say versus brick and mortar, because obviously it has to integrate, but that's a challenge for all retailers. How are you handling that?
Well, it's not bricks and mortars versus e-commerce, it's one. Yeah, it's one holistic thing. What's happening, and it's been happening for a number of years, and if you look at the stats today, it's happening faster in Europe actually than here currently, but is that the customer is the most connected customer ever, and they choose to buy. I mean, how many people now buy online versus go and travel down to the store? But what they actually do, if you can actually have both offers to them, we need to be available to customers now 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's as simple as that. And you don't open your stores 24 hours, 7 days a week because it doesn't make economic sense. But you encourage your customers to shop online with you. Yeah. But you turn it into one package. So Shopco appears as one package. You can either come in the store and buy it. You can buy it online and pick it up in the store. This is the fastest growing part of that business. Or you can buy it online and I will ship it to you, to your personal address. Or you can buy it online and I'll ship it to your local hometown store, which is in a remote town where you can't get the ranges. And particularly now that people are more, I talked to a great guy last week who talked about millennials and blows all the myths away. This generation isn't the most tech-savvy generation. It's the most tech-dependent generation, our shoppers now. So they need the internet, they need online, and like I do myself. My wife's terrible for spending money online, but oh my God. But you look at my son, he never goes into a store, he Googles everything before he goes, and he gets the best price, the best product, he understands the spec, and then he decides if he's going to go and buy it in the store, or if he's going to actually order it online. If he wants to order online, and he doesn't want to pay a shipping cost, he wants to go in the store anyway to pick it up, or he wants it delivered to his home. So the most tech dependent of those, and that's growing very rapidly. I think the penetration in the US now is about 11% of all retail sales are done in my particular business, general merchandise business. 11% of sales are done online. In the UK, it's 40%. And some company was telling me the other day they think the US will be at 40% in 5 years' time. So you think the implications of that on bricks and mortar. So what you do is embroil your customer in all avenues of buying from you. And we know from statistics that the customer who uses our online site and comes into our stores and shops usually spends 24 to 25% more than a customer that uses one channel or the other channel. Because there's no doubt you spend more online. I mean, my house at the moment is like a constant procession of UPS, back and forward. I'm sure you probably see the same, yeah? And you tend to spend more online because it's easier. You're in a store, and then a lot of customers now use their technical iPhones or whatever they're using in the store to research prices. That was Best Buy's big problem. We're going in there and using them as a display store. And that continues. So e-com, we hadn't really invested in it. It started in 2009, so it's one of our key priorities, and we're spending a lot of money developing that site now. We'll launch a new mobile site. We've got a mobile site already, but we'll revamp it, re-platform it. It launches in June. You can buy online, pick up in store in any Shopko store from July onwards. And it is the fastest part of our growing business in terms of sales. But you also have to remember, at the end of the day, there's still 89% of sales in the US today happen in stores, in bricks and mortar. Now that will reduce, but that's still it's still obviously a very integral part of your business. But the way it's changed so rapidly is that we looked at some stats the other day and Sears, if you talk about productivity of their stores, and that is the sales per square foot, is what you look at in retail. They would have to close 43% of their real estate to get back to the same sales per square foot they were achieving in 2006. Now, they've lost business to other competitors, but that's a sign of how much e-com is driving that trend as well. And you can argue it's not good news because we've all got big stores and there's lots of big malls in the US, and what happens to all that eventually? And you all seen the strip malls now, as you call them, that are 2/3 empty, or have just the cashier check store here or something of that nature. So it's a huge change. But retail always changes. I mean, when I first joined retail in the UK, there was no small stores. There was all small stores, all 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 convenience stores, square feet. Then they went through the 80s and they bought all these big boxes, and that didn't really work, and then they went back. If you go to the UK today, it's back where it was in the 1970s when I started. They have 15,000, 20,000 small shops now, and customers spend more time shopping daily in the local convenience store. Different demographic in the US. It's got far bigger urban centres, but people don't jump in cars and drive to the big supermarkets anymore. They shop locally. And e-com plays very well in that market because you can actually order it from John Lewis on Oxford Street in London and go into your local Waitrose store the next day and it's sitting there waiting for you. And that's what customers want today. They demand it, particularly young mothers who use it more than any other type of the generation. Yep. Go on.
I'm just curious about the employment, the jobs in retail, if that's something we should encourage people to get into. You know, you sometimes hear kind of on the lower end of the jobs, but not that everyone's going to aspire to your level, but I mean, what do your middle managers make, and what's a good career path for them?
I actually started off in Liverpool in a supermarket cleaning shelves and filling fixtures, so I didn't do too bad. There's great careers in retail. Retail will always be here in one format and the other, and I always believe the bricks and mortar store will always be here. There's been a revolution in paying people recently, as you've noticed, that Walmart starting to pay their staff. A huge cost, $2 billion to them. So unfortunately for that, you customers and the vendors are going to pay for that, but that's Walmart. You know, we've increased all of our staff's wages recently to go above minimum earnings levels because they're very important people. There's a great career in retail for anybody, yeah? Because retail will never go away. It might look a bit different, and it looked, you know, if I go back to retail, as I said, in the 70s, it certainly looks different today. But in 30 or 40 years' time, there'll still be stores. They'll look different than they are today. There's lots of investment in stores now in restaurants and entertainment and destinations and all that sort of stuff, because that's what people are spending the money on. They're spending the money on experiences. I'd encourage any young, we take in every year a number of graduate EMTs, as you know. And in Loblaw, we used to take bigger business. We used to take 100 students on straight from college every year, or university, into retail. You know, the retention rate of those was about 98%. Nobody left, because when you get in there, it's hard work. There's no dodging retail. And the best way to understand retail is start here and come up. Yeah. And they make living wages, otherwise they wouldn't stay. I've got managers in Shopko been with us 30, 35 years. Built the whole family of staying there. Is it the highest paying industry? I don't know, I don't think so, but it's a good paying industry. And you know, as long as you people want to buy nice goods, retail will be here.
Your Tuesday meetings, Who attends those? How long are they? And how do you judge how well each of the meetings are they worth it?
The meetings I have internally, we have too many of them. Retail's about selling, it's about on the shop floor. I discourage them to a degree. The main countenance meetings I have are usually on a Monday morning when we review. I always, when I think about when I get the senior team together, and that's my senior direct report. So that's the head of retail stores, the chief merchant, the CFO, he's always got to be there, the head of human resources, the head of the apparel department and so forth, just a senior top team. And there's about 7 of us. And I always try to, when I'm sitting in meetings, because I'm an operator by trade, I'm not an administrator. That's what I've done all my life, is operate. I tend to talk about the first 20% of the time, talking about what happened. So how were the sales, how were the margin, did this work, did that work, why didn't it work, and then spend the rest of the time talking about what we're going to do about it, or the future, or what's coming. Then I have a monthly meeting with Sun Capital, who am I normally get to go to Boca once a month and trying to explain to them what happened. And none of them are retailers, so that can be quite difficult at times. What do you mean the customers didn't? What do you mean it snowed in Green Bay and the customers didn't come out? How does that affect it? How does the weather affect it? Yeah, if only they knew. And then we have I have a cadence of a board meeting which I operate once a month with Sun Capital and some of my key members. And then they all have their subsets of meetings. And then every Tuesday there's a total gathering of all the staff in head office, and they all have a huddle. And they all talk about last week's performance, what's going to happen this week, what's new in the business, who's new in the business, what's coming next week, the week after. So they feel part of the community as well. And that happens in every store. At the beginning of every shift in every store, the teams huddle together. And there's a conversation then about the store's performance yesterday and what's next and so forth. And then I have a number of other meetings I have to go to around the Shopko Foundation, where that's, benefit, how that's growing its income so we can donate back to our communities. I sit in merchant meetings and so forth. So I try to keep them to a minimum, because I really think, if I've got a guy who's running the stores for me, I really just think he should spend 2/3 of his time out in the stores. And if I've got a merchant with me, he should be spending at least 50% of his time in the markets, finding what's new, what the products are out there that the customers want and so forth, and meeting his vendors. So I try to keep that to a minimum, keep the flow operating all the time.
Maybe one more? One more?
Yep.
With all the changes in retail and the goal of reaching customers through more channels, can you comment on the importance or changes in branding in your industry?
It means in terms of the brands or the way the industry brands itself. Well, we've just changed our brand. You see, it's now green and the stuff that counts in Shopko. I felt Shopko's brand, its previous brand, depicted Shopko as it was, yeah. And this new brand depicts really about what the stuff we do is what stuff that counts for the customer. Brands are long-term investments, as the bankers would call them. Yeah, they're not something that, it takes a long time to change a brand. So I was conscious of the fact that Shopko represented an era in retail that maybe has passed. An era of the low price, discount, sell it high. Now, it's discount and price is still important, but it plays a lesser factor. So we really wanted to make Shopko more community-based, more local, because that's what we are. We're not opening big box stores as you see in Green Bay. We're opening the smaller formats you see in Seymour and places like that. And these are in small town communities. And when we go into a small communities, the customers tell me this, not me. They feel that Shopko adds, the Shopko brand adds to that community. When Walmart go into communities, they feel that Walmart take away from the community. Yeah, that's a very powerful brand statement. So we actually changed our brand to depict that we do the stuff that counts for you. Yeah, for our simplicity seeker, for our person who's living their day-to-day life. We come into small communities, or we trade in bigger communities, and we bring to you and provide you the stuff that you need that counts for you in your everyday life. That's a brand message that takes time to resonate, but it's proven on the way that you measure these things to resonate very strongly in our smaller communities, quicker than our bigger communities. How will retail rebrand itself? I mean, retail's got some of the most iconic brands in the world. I mean, not just talking about supermarkets or general merchandise, but if you think of everybody in the world knows Selfridges. Everybody in the world knows Harrods. So retail is, I can talk, Tesco in the UK and Sainsbury's opened their own bank. I know there's a number of bankers in the room. And the reason they have their financial services now are huge. They're bigger than most of the chain street banks in the UK. If you look at TescoFinance.com. And one of the reasons they started that journey back in the 90s is that when they asked the general public about what they felt about the Tesco brand, it was the most trusted brand in the UK. So they trusted the retailer. It was a bit iconic situation in the UK, and they trusted Sainsbury's. So what retailers need to continue to do is build a brand with stuff that counts, that customers trust. Trust that they get everyday fair price, trust that they get the product they want, and trust that they're acting on your best behalf. So all the noise you hear about retailers, you don't hear so much now about them making too much money, because they don't. It's all about, how can they work in the communities, and we play a big part in our local communities, as we do in Green Bay. And we donate a lot of money back to our communities. And we're doing more than just giving money back nowadays. We actually go and we take part in activities in these small towns. And that's the way that we generate the funds that go back out into them. So it's very much about trust and maintaining that trust. Okay, thank you.
Peter, thank you very much. Terrific presentation. Kevin Quinn and I had the opportunity to visit with Peter, 9 or 10 months ago, and got a bit of a sneak preview about what you heard today. And it's a fascinating and clearly successful story, and we wish you all the best, and thank you very much for being here. If you want a DVD of Peter's presentation, please see Amy Kundiger, or is Amy, which Amy? Amy Sorensen, over here. Also, while Amy's got her hand up, this being the last session of the year, we'll be talking soon about speakers for next year. So if you have ideas for people that you think would be terrific CEO Breakfast Series speakers, drop Amy a note, give her a call, or drop me a note. We'd appreciate your suggestions. Before we close, I'm going to have my friend Margaret LeBrun say a minute about the Think Conference.
Each year, Insight puts on our annual Think event, Technology and Human Innovation Networking Conference. It's this Thursday at the UW Fox Valley Theater, 3 to 6 p.m. It's high energy. We've got a wonderful speaker, Paul Voss. Some of us heard him last fall, and he had us on the edge of our chairs. Really great. But then we're going to be announcing our Insight Innovation Award winners. St. Norbert was a winner a couple of years ago for all the innovation they've injected into everything they do. You really want to go so that you can see what the innovators are doing, and maybe your company would be a natural to be nominated for next year. We'll have networking at the end. So we hope to see you there. Look for this in your folder, or drop a card with me or anyone else from Insight here, and we'll get you registered. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. It is a good time. It's worth your time and effort to be there. How about one more hand for Peter McMahon? Terrific presentation. Thank you again for coming. Enjoy your summer, and won't be long, and we'll be back starting off the fall season. So have a great time.